Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you're joining us from, and salam. We're saying hello today from France, UK, Germany, and Canada. So welcome to MACFEST 2025. This is our first event in the environment mini festival, one of the 9 mini festivals MACFEST is hosting every year. And this is a special event. It's an international academic panel on sustainability and environment. Our host for today is Professor Karin Vogt. She's a specialist in teaching English and French as a foreign language. She's the person sitting in Germany. She's teaching at the University of Education in Heidelberg in Germany. So just a little bit more about Karin. She's worked in various educational sectors, such as secondary schools, vocational schools, adult education, everything to do with foreign language, with vocationally oriented language. Her interests also include the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages and Digital Media, artificial intelligence in the foreign language classroom. And she has published widely in all these areas. She has served as a vice president of the German Association for Foreign Language Research from 2015 to 2021, and on the executive committee for the European Association of Language Testing and Assessment. She has recently been appointed on the Advisory Educational Board of Language Assessment quarterly. What an impressive educational CV. Fantastic experience, Karin. So over to you.
Thank you, Katarzyna, for the warm welcome. And I would also like to welcome you from Heidelberg, Germany, and give you good afternoon. And with me, thank you for joining us today. And with me today on this panel on the university's global event on sustainability and environment are Dr. Saima Ansari and Emeritus Professor James Trevelyan. Saima is joining us from Manchester, and James is joining us from St. Louis in the USA. So to begin with, we might have the other panelists join us later, but let's start and begin with you. And I would like you to introduce you, and I will have a question to you. I would like to introduce you. I can see that Professor Odeh Al-Jayyousi has also joined us here. And I'm going to give a brief round of introduction, and then I'm going to ask you, how do you personally relate to sustainability and the environment? So what is your personal stake in this? Maybe you've got a biographical link and so on. So, ladies first, I'd say let's start with Saima Ansari, Dr. Saima Ansari. She's a research associate at the Sustainable Consumption Institute at the University of Manchester in the UK, and she contributes to the Towards Inclusive Environmental Sustainability project. And she also challenges Eurocentric notions of environmental behavior by foregrounding how migrants from the global south shape more equitable and sustainable cities in the global north, right? So very interesting project that you work on here. And previously, she was a postdoctoral research associate who still is dedicated to combating violence against women and girls. So she's got very interesting curriculum. She adopts an intersectional approach, as you can imagine, rooted in Islamic feminism. And Kasra will love that about this, uniting her dual passions for social justice and sustainability to foster inclusive, transformative change. So a warm welcome. And I would like to ask you, How do you personally relate to sustainability in the environment, Saima?
Yeah, so thank you so much for the introduction. It's basically like you said, in my research, broader research is around intersectionality, like, inclusion, listening to like the lived experience of marginalized communities, Islamic feminism. But I'm fairly new to sustainability field. I joined a TIES project. This was April last year. So my background, although, is in sociology, and it's about intersectionality and inclusivity. That's how I got like into sustainability. And actually it was really interesting for me to take part in a field like sustainability, which is very exclusive. It's very white, it's very, like middle class. It's very exclusionary to people that, don't fit that narrative. And it is heavily focused on what's happening around Europe and in the West, as they say, the global North. And so the voices of people that are actually in the global South, that, arguably probably a lot more affected by what's happening with the climate change, they're not listened to, and it's not, like their voices are kind of just left on the cover. So yeah, joining this project, it's made me learn, and I'm still learning so much more, but it's just my passion for, like justice and, the inclusive change that I want to bring about through my research. So yeah, that's how I got into sustainability and this kind of
Thank
net.
you. Can I just ask you maybe to for our listeners to explain what intersectionality is? Because
Yeah, so intersectionality
work,
basically,
right?
so it's a breakdown of looking at like the different aspects of identity. So it's about looking at race, gender, maybe sexuality, maybe even where you live actually places a kind of different aspect of your identity, like different focus of your identity. And these practices obviously are excluded, and the intersectionality is very new to sociology, like not very new to sociology, but to, for example, the normal sciences, it's very exclusionary. It's only looking at one aspect of a person's identity and not kind of including these various identities that we all carry.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saima Ansari. Let's maybe turn to Professor James Trevelyan. He's Emeritus Professor at the University of Western Australia in Perth, lovely Perth, Australia. And he is like a multi-talent from what I've seen from his CV. He's an engineer, he's an educator, he's a researcher, and he's also recently a startup entrepreneur. So hats off to you. He invented an energy-saving, low-emissions air conditioning technology, which is called CoolZ. Right, check it out. CoolZ on coolz.com. The thing is that he being used to a climate with high summer temperatures at night that are too high for normal sleep. That's also for people who do not at the same time can't afford conventional air conditioning. So it's also something about social justice in a way, right? So it's about equity in a way. So he's done research on engineering practice, and that comes in handy for his current activities. And he's also helped define the Engineers Australia professional competencies for chartered engineers. Writing a couple of books in the process, for example, The Making of an Expert Engineer and Learning Engineering Practice. And that, of course, has influenced the future of engineering education in universities and also in workplaces. Yeah, and internationally, he's best known for pioneering research on sheep-shearing robots, another thing that is amazing, but also very Australian, right? From 1975 to 1993, and also for the first industrial robot that could remotely be operated via the internet in 1994. So in the very early days of the internet. So that was basically a forerunner of the so-called Internet of Things, which is huge at the moment. It's not that recent. You have showed us, right? You have also made significant contributions to help with the removal of anti-personnel landmines, which is a very important work, I would say, and other things. So basically, He's also he's interested in identifying significant factors that make economic and social development in the global south more challenging than in wealthier countries. So we're talking about the global south and the global north. They're just like, so you've got something in common as well, right? The two panelists already. Yes, and of course, your research offers steps toward like significant improvements in progress towards the UN, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which we have pledged to reach by 2030, right? Let's see how we're faring on this one. So thanks very much, and I would like to ask you as well, how do you personally relate to sustainability and the environment?
Thank you so much for that introduction, Karin. I guess I would start with my home country, Australia, where we have an amazing group of people, Australian Indigenous Aboriginal people, who have achieved what really you could describe as sustainability. Their civilization, their culture extends back now at least 65,000 years. And no other group of people on the planet has managed to achieve that. And so if we're going to talk about sustainability, there is a lot to be learned from this. And I guess that's the point I would like to start. So one of the things I used to explore with my students, and we used to get people who, Aboriginal people who would come in and talk about this, is the notion of country. Now, as far as I can determine, for most cultures in the world, the idea of the environment is something separate from ourselves. But in Aboriginal culture, it's very different. Aboriginal people have the idea of country. That is the land with which they identify. And their view of themselves is that they are part of the country. So whatever we do to country, we do to ourselves. And I think that that's a very powerful concept. There are some other groups on the planet that share similar ideas, but none have achieved the longevity of Aboriginal people. So then I'd like to move from Australia to Pakistan. Thanks to, I go to Pakistan because I married my dear wife, Saima, and her family, of course, but I didn't just marry into a family, I married into a culture and a country and even a subcontinent. So just to give you some idea, the temperatures at night across most urban town and village settings across South Asia, around about 1 billion people have to try and sleep in temperatures of around 35 to 40 degrees Celsius. That's around about 100 degrees Fahrenheit for those of us in America at the moment. And of course, that's impossible. You actually can't sleep at temperatures above 27 degrees. If you have a fan, you can just make it if you're at 30 degrees, but it's pretty uncomfortable. And the reason is fundamental physiology. Above that temperature, your core body temperature increases hour by hour. So you simply cannot achieve normal sleep. And these people are deprived of sleep for up to 5 or 6 months every year. So if you're thinking about why progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals in the Global South is so slow, here's one of the major factors, just one of the major factors. And it's been, it's only in the last 18 months to 2 years that I've actually managed to uncover the medical evidence for this. For years, I have known about these temperatures, but it never occurred to me that this is having such an effect on sleep. And if you live in Pakistan or India at that time of the year, you'll know that people just exist in a kind of zombie haze of total exhaustion. And I think now you can understand why. The other factor I think is important to understand is that sustainability for the planet Earth is going to depend on sustainability in countries like China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, across Africa, Central America, Central and South America, where there are large populations who are struggling to adapt. And we have to understand that adaptation is going to be an important part of this because we have locked in temperature rises, very significant temperature rises now. So I'm sure you've all heard about the IPCC predictions that said, well, if we go over 1.5 degrees Celsius warming, we're going to be in trouble. Well, we virtually locked in temperature rises to 2 degrees Celsius now, because even with the policy commitments so far, we're not going to see significant reductions in greenhouse emissions. And the IPCC has repeatedly warned that we need to get greenhouse emissions to net zero by about 2050, 2060, preferably earlier than that. We're not going to achieve that. So we have locked in significant sea level rises, around 4 millimeters per year at the moment. We have locked in significant warming. We've locked in a great degree of unpredictability about what's going to happen. Wet places are going to be wetter for sure. Dry places are going to be drier. That's a particular problem in Australia, and so on. So when it comes to me as an engineer and teaching students, which I did for a long time, we have to change our perspective from not only achieving significant reductions in resource use and emissions, but also we have to deal with significant temperature and climate variations as well. And of course, from a sociological point of view, we're going to have to work out how to deal with mass migration. Several hundred million people are going to be affected in the next 30 years or so. We have to work with that and try and anticipate that and work out how we're going to deal with it. The last factor I'd introduce is something, again, that I discovered through my work on engineering practice. We instinctively think that whatever you need to do is a lot cheaper in countries like India and Pakistan. One of the big surprises to me was to find out that the opposite is true. So if you look at the cost of safe drinking water in India and Pakistan, today it is typically 10 to 30 times the cost in a country like Britain or Australia or America. Why? Because of the way the water systems that have already been installed are operated. To get safe drinking water, it has to be carried. You can't send it through pipes at the moment because the pipes are permanently contaminated with nasty bacteria. And that's why it's so expensive. But it's not just water. Energy costs are typically 5 times the cost in a wealthy country at the point at which energy does something useful. And there's many factors that contribute to that. So what we learned from this is that the cost of achieving the kind of changes we need to make in countries like India, Pakistan, even in China, are significantly higher than they historically have been in wealthy countries. Now, maybe there are things we can do about that, but it's important to factor that in. Essentially, the issue is low productivity, and that's why we are progressing so slowly towards the Sustainable Development Goals. We really have to shift our timescale on that, and it's going to be several decades in my estimation. So those are some of the challenges which I've faced as an engineer, and thanks for that introduction, Karin, about Coolsey.com. That's some small contribution so far, and I'm very hopeful that we can get funding to scale that up enormously and bring durable and normal, healthy sleep to these people who are suffering at the moment. It's important to understand that the reason for these high temperatures is twofold. One is definitely climate change, but the major factor actually has been urbanization. The shift to urban concentrations where there is so little shade, we have materials that absorb heat and store it at night, and so on and so forth. So it's that urbanization factor which is impractical to reverse now. We're stuck with it. So that's basically where I'm coming from in this discussion.
Thank you so much for giving your perspective based on your biography. And we're going to turn to Professor Odeh Al-Jayyousi, and I hope I have pronounced this correctly.
That's fine.
Who is a professor of innovation policy at the Arabian Gulf University in Bahrain, has been a professor since 2015. And he is also into innovation, like almost everybody on this panel. In case you were wondering why I am on this panel, as a professor of English as a foreign language, yes, I am also interested in my field and my discipline. We also think about environment and sustainability, and we have a research branch. And at my university, I might be able to tell you more about it. I have been on the board of the Center for Education for Sustainable Development. So this is my small link, but I'm nothing to the experts that are sitting here. And one of them is Professor Odeh Al-Jayyousi as a professor of innovation policy. And his research interest includes innovation policy, sustainability, foresight, and innovation management. And he's published widely over 70 articles in peer-reviewed international journals, 7 books on sustainable development, renewable energy, urban planning, innovation. And he's also been a vice president for science and research at the Royal Scientific Society in Jordan, and the regional director for IUCN, you have to tell us what that is, but in Switzerland. And he was a university professor in engineering and a dean of research. He received a lot of awards, and he's also into water, global water leadership. That was one of his awards that he got. He was awarded, and he also received an award for scientists and social initiatives. CSR Excellent Awards, Leaders of Sustainability Award, you name it, he's got it. So he's got them. He also led the development of the AGU strategy plans, and also doing university accreditation work for universities and so on. And he was awarded his PhD in urban planning and policy. So this leads well into what Professor James Trevelyan said earlier. And again, my question to you would be, what is it? How do you personally relate to sustainability and the environment?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Well, I'll try to look at the my life journey, the journey that was based on what I call it far from equilibrium or creative destruction. I grew up as a refugee. At 6 years old, when I was 6 years old, I crossed the Jordan River. So we lost our land. My father used to live in Palestine, in Jaffa, and he used to be a landlord. So we lost our land and our livelihood. So at 6 years old, our family had to start to have a sustainable livelihood in Jordan. So later as a refugee, focusing on education for sustainable development was key. In order to make a living, you have to excel in education. When in graduate school, I had a chance to be a consultant, actually with people working in Southeast Asia, in Pakistan, working with Islam and water management. So we tried to look at key themes from the notion of stewardship or decentralization or water governance, water equity. And my story started with how you link culture and water. So we published a book on water management and Islam with the United Nations University and ISISCO. Then later, in 2005, I was regional director of IUCN. And in Switzerland, there was a think tank coming from Cambridge and Germany and Australia. We have people from Australia. The question was about the future of sustainability. What's the future? So it was a think tank talk. And one German scholar, he mentioned that in order to define sustainability, we need to define what constitutes good life. Good life in Arabic is حياة طيبة. حياة طيبة. So what constitutes a good life? So I started working on a new book, which is Islam and Sustainable Development, which basically talks about the idea of what constitutes a good life, or حياة طيبة, from an Islamic perspective. And this book was published into Arabic and has a wide coverage. So basically, it talks about the idea of justice, social capital, the idea of harmony with nature, biomimicry, and the idea of people-centered development and spirituality. Later, I had a chance during COVID to work with UNEP. We worked on something called Al-Mizan. Al-Mizan basically is a charter talking about balance, at different levels, at cosmology, at nation level, at individual level, the idea of justice and how Islam reflects the idea of balance and sustainability. Later, I had the chance to work on sustainable innovation as a professor of innovation policy, and also I looked at culture and sustainability and how can innovation or frugal innovation and from Southeast Asia, how can frugal innovation or sustainable innovation can help the voiceless, the marginalized, and the refugees. So now witnessing the global news on the global media, we see lots of refugees, lots of, I would say, far from equilibrium, that now humanity is being at test in Gaza, in Palestine, where we see a human genocide, and we see 2 million people are under fire. And we see that we are talking, academicians or researchers from different parts of the world, we feel that we are living in an ivory tower, we are marginalized, and we are being tested as educator or researcher. How can we contribute to the voiceless, to the refugees, to the marginalized that are being under attack and under apartheid regime and under homicide and educide as well. Now I had a chance to work with some research on how we can regain higher education in Gaza using online education. And people talk about educide, not only homicide, the notion of educide and rather than homicide. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. So much food for thought, and we haven't even finished the introduction round. Thank you so much. I would like to welcome Dr. Faiza Abbasi, and you made it to the panelist link. Thank you so much for being here. And I would like to introduce her as well, last but not least, of course. Dr. Faiza Abbasi is director. She works at the Malaysian Mission Teacher Training Center, and that's at the Aligarh Muslim University. And she's had this position since February 2012. And I heard that Aligarh was the Cambridge of India, Cambridge University of India. So she received her master's, she earned her master's and PhD from the Department of Wildlife Sciences at the same university. And she engages in multidisciplinary teaching on undergraduate and postgraduate levels and research in environmental studies and faith-based conversation. So you also have something in common, right? So it's about culture, it's about religion, and how to combine that, how to marry this with conversation. Especially to students of madrasa background in the Faculty of Theology and the Center for Quran Studies. So basically, if I have understood that correctly, your position is in the Faculty of Theology and you train teachers. Yes, you served as she served as a program director for the U.S. Department of State's Access Program for Schools, and that is just finished. Also for the Pandit Madan Mohan Malavia National Mission on Teachers and Teaching by the Ministry of Education. And she also conducted and executed a 5-year academic leadership development program for over 50 Indian minorities managed degree colleges, traveling to majority of them myself. So you did a lot of traveling as well. And you also have a lot of programs that you completed, like, for example, the Leadership for Academicians program of the Ministry of Education at Ohio State University, Monash University in Melbourne, the Nurturing Future Leadership program from the Indian Institute of Management in Udaipur. And she's also obtained skill enhancement certificates galore diplomas from the Writers Bureau, from the Center for Quran Studies, from Harvard edX, and so on. She's been conferred with the Governor's Medal for NSS, the Ministry of Youth Affairs. So she's a very successful Best Paper Awards and amongst other awards. So she's been heavily awarded, so to say. Right, and she was also listed, and I think that's also very interesting, as one of the 100 inspiring Muslim women in 2021. Right. Of course, you're an expert in higher education institutions across the country, and she's also published widely 16 books in English and Urdu, and lots of over 50 papers, articles, stories, and different publication outlets. And she's also on the editorial boards, a reviewer for peer-reviewed listed journals, and so on. I could go on here, but I would like to ask you. There's more. She's traveled extensively. She's been presenting bilingual events, and so on. So she has been teaching abroad, and now she's joining us from Aligarh in India, correct? And the same question goes to you. Welcome on the panel. And the same question goes to you. How do you personally relate to sustainability and the environment?
Well, thank you so much, Karin, for that introduction. And thank you, MACFEST, for having me on this panel. I feel greatly honored sharing with you, Saima, James, and Professor Odeh Al-Jayyousi. Yes, of course, we have quite a lot in common. And as has already been said in my introduction, by training and by profession, I am a wildlife scientist. How my journey with wildlife sciences began is very interesting. I grew up reading, admiring, appreciating literature, bilingual literature, grew up telling stories, grew up reading stories, and grew up loving a cause that's worth the while. So this was the striving of a small town girl to find a cause worth fighting for. So when I finished college, I felt I had very strong feelings about women's issues. I had very strong feelings about equality, inequality, etc. And then I did find a lot of people working for this. But back then, around 30 years back, environment, ecology, and sustainability actually wasn't even coined till then. This word sustainability wasn't even there. So environment, ecology, conservation, these were very less heard of, and there were very few people who found it worth the while to devote their lives to such causes. And as somebody who was very sensitive about society, about people, about social causes, and also as somebody who knew the science behind ecology, who knew the science behind populations of species of flora and fauna, I felt this is some immense rich wealth that we have inherited, and we are losing it very fast. This is not just my love for animals that I'm here. I'm not an animal rights and activist, like I'm not a people for ethical treatment type of a person. I understand the dynamics of populations of species which are becoming endangered and threatened and vulnerable one after another. So my journey with wildlife sciences began with my master's. I worked on forests. I worked inside national parks and sanctuaries. I used to conduct surveys, and I used to conduct population census exercises. And apart from animal handling, I did everything that an ecologist does in order to understand species, their ecology, their biology, and then to be able to suggest upon conservation measures for these species. Because the number of plants and animals that are joining the IUCN red data list is quite an alarm. 6 or 7 years into this, that comprised my master's and my PhD and some community work that I did alongside people who live inside and outside national parks, people who own natural habitats like a wetland or a lake or a small grassland or a woodlot or something. I felt that there are very strong limitations of science in order to enable conservation, to let conservation happen. We have to bring in the human dimension, because this is not something that we can sit down in a laboratory and do. And this does not even need rocket science. I mean, I come from India, I'm a very proud Indian. I know a very, very magnificent large cat is the national animal of India. And I know that there are just about 2,000 individuals of the tiger left in the wild, and I really want to protect them. But I also know that the government alone and the scientists alone cannot protect the tiger. It's an indicator species. We are losing it not just because we are killing it in the wild or not just because we're encroaching on its habitat. There are several reasons arranged one over another in a sort of a pyramid, because of which we are losing some of the magnificent indicator species. Our entire behavior, our entire relationship, our entire interaction with the environment, with the natural environment particularly, has to change. We have to become more energy efficient. We have to become more ethical in our treatment, not just towards animals, but also towards resources, living or non-living resources. So I kind of started taking interest in people's behaviors towards natural resources, resources that we need in order to survive. And out of my own interest in cultures and in religions and in civilizations, I came across many practices in ancient cultures and in ancient civilizations, which are very, very much in harmony with nature, but then being destroyed because of ill-conceived development, post-industrial revolution, because of the kind of urbanization that Professor James was just talking about. And these people, for no fault of theirs, are losing not just their rich heritage, not just their resources, their modes of subsistence, but also their connect with and their well-being. So being a very devout Muslim myself, having gone through the scriptures and having gone through a lot of literature available on Islam and the Holy Quran and the Islamic history and civilizations, I found quite a lot of teachings of this religion, as well as quite a lot of practices of Muslim civilizations across the world. There are quite a few in India. There are quite a few I don't consider India and Pakistan as geographically very different, but consider them as part of one subcontinent. And even in the Arabian Peninsula, I happened to live there for like 2-3 years, sometime back, a couple of decades ago, and found systems there which are an indication of the indigenous wisdom of people, which is inspired by their religion. So it became my passion to explore these indigenous practices in civilizations across the world. And I found it my calling to let there be a vibrant, viable intersection between Islam and ecology. And that's how I started teaching students from madrasa background about environmental sciences. Then I developed a couple of new syllabi, new papers that have been included in the UG and PG degree courses for students to understand the intersection between Islamic teachings and ecological ethics, the Quranic perspective. I do think I will be getting more opportunities to talk to you about, because apart from this contribution as an academician, there's a lot that I do as an activist also for sustainability, especially by the involvement of women. So I think Karin can take it forward, and we can, bring in more to this table when our turn comes.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you. And I get comments. I'm getting comments here on the chat saying, "Wow, what a lovely panel this is! An amazing group of scholars. Thanks for organizing this." And I feel the same. Feel very honored to be part of this. So thank you very much. How we are going to proceed is this. I'm going to give the panelists some leading questions. And you are very welcome to respond to them. And you are also, dear the audience, you're very welcome to write down any comments or questions in the chat. There will be time at the end if you have questions to a particular panelist. Please indicate that in the chat so that I can address people. And there will be time at the end. And I'm going to collect the questions as we go along. But first and foremost, I would like to direct my question at you. You have already sort of answered some of the questions, namely what's sustainability from your personal perspective and also from your perspective of your discipline, which was fascinating to take a look into. So thank you very much, all of you. But I would like to maybe combine this with what is the most pressing need that you see that is related to sustainability and the environment from your perspective, either personally from your context, what's the current situation in your context, and what's the perspective you could choose, of course, whatever is most important to you, the perspective of your discipline. And I would like to start with Dr. Saima Ansari again, and give the question to you.
Yeah, so it's just great listening to everyone, because I can weave a thread through like my kind of the project that I'm currently on, which looks at the practices of people who've moved from the global south to the global north. So like we looked at Manchester in particular, so the Pakistani and Somali communities. So like I can touch on ideas, about like water saving and like the whole Islamic concept of like the stewardship, like Islam teaches you to be like keepers of the earth. So a lot of our participants actually, they made that very vocal, that the reason that they had sustainable practices was they were trying to follow a concept of Islam. So like I can weave through from all the panelists, like all the different things that like, it would be great to like have a conversation over and learning all those things. So yeah, like back to your question, and I think, we touched on this. And I think some of the panelists already said, my background is sociology, like obviously it's very different from the other sciences. But I think particularly with sustainability, there's a real need and a profound like need for a human kind of experience. From learning from, socially, culturally, politically, there's so much to be learned. And you can't take that away from, talks about sustainability. We're not robots. We're not going to mechanically do things. There are questions around like, changing people's attitudes, and actually where does that come from? And, the conversations that we need to have, which means listening to the diverse experiences and reshaping so those conversations are more inclusive and equitable. And I think one of the pressing needs that I think my project highlights, and I can sense from what the panelists said as well, is about acknowledging and like addressing the gaps. So like, for example, we have like race or class, they're big issues. Gender, a lot of women, like a lot of the sustainable kind of living and standard living, a lot of them are focused on the male, but actually the women do a lot of the work, for example, like food preparation, buying groceries, things like that. So actually looking at the gender kind of experiences. Migration status, as like I highlighted in the past, like like a refugee status. Actually, what does that mean, and what kind of knowledges do they bring? It's not, a lot of the times climate change has forced people to move into environments that are completely new. Well, how do they adapt? How do they bring in their experiences? How do we learn from their experiences? What can we bring to the table? And obviously other social factors that might be shaping their experience. Because I think without this lens, we are really kind of reinforcing, inequality, reinforcing like all the inequalities that already exist, because we're not acknowledging the differences, the experiences that people have. And for example, like my study is looking at like the Muslim population. So, our participants again and again were talking about Islam as a way of life, and when we had asked questions about sustainability, they often responded, well, actually, my religion asked me to practice stewardship. So not talking about religion in this way, or particularly Islam in this way, would be counterfeit to just say, oh, like science is one thing, but religion is something else. Now, actually, there's so much to learn from religious practices or cultural practice, or even, non-religious, like spiritual practices that people have. So yeah, I think that's one of the most pressing needs, the whole inclusivity in sustainability.
Thank you so much. And I can already see the weaving going on here. Yeah, thanks very much for your perspective here. And it is quite clear that we are an interdisciplinary panel, and everybody brings so much of their expertise to the table here, to this panel here, and that's just very fascinating to see. So let's maybe stick to the same order for the panelists, and let me ask Professor James Trevelyan, what is your take on this?
Thank you, Karin. Well, I guess the two priorities that I see are absolutely essential. One is cooling, not only for people, but also for food. So a very large proportion of the food that is grown around the world is lost because of the lack of availability for cooling from the moment it's harvested. If you look at food distribution in wealthy countries, refrigeration is used basically from the moment the food leaves the harvester. And we have to extend this technology right across the world. And that means doing it much more cheaply and with much more efficiently than we have before. We have the technologies to do that. So ultimately, the next priority is to educate engineers. And I think the most important thing here is the significance of what I call the switch. A very simple device. Because all sustainability issues stem from a decision by somebody to turn on a switch, whether it's a water pump or an air conditioner or starting a car or whatever. That decision, it lies at the core of sustainability. And this is where we have the intersection between technology, human behavior, and, as all four speakers have mentioned, religion and spirituality. Because we have the examples in front of us of people who have managed to evolve sustainable civilizations. We need to learn from them and learn fast. And I think that we can do that by sharing information. I think that we have made significant strides in terms of equality, at least of access. If you think of devices like this, well, this is an iPhone. Not everybody can afford an iPhone, but now it's possible for practically everybody in any country in the world to have a mobile phone and be able to access the internet. And that's a big example of how we can break down the barriers between rich and poor. When the poorest people have access to the internet, the transformation begins. And I have seen this in the remotest corners of Pakistan, where there's a very enlightened policy of subsidizing mobile services in the most remote parts of the country. So there's a very high penetration of accessibility to internet and telecommunications. So we have examples in front of us. We can do it. So finally, I'd come back to the education of engineers. And the crucial piece there is that while we're very good at educating engineers to all about science and technology in universities, we have an enormous gap in terms of teaching engineers how to transform ideas into practical reality. So where I started my research on engineering practice was in Pakistan, where I had this difficult thing to recognize, to reconcile, where we had very bright young engineers, well-trained, well-educated, quite often in Western countries, unable to transform their ideas into practical reality. And yet those same engineers, when they migrate to countries like Britain, America, Canada, and so on, have no difficulty matching the performance of local engineers. So the question in my mind is, what is the difference? What are we dealing with here? It's taken a long time to come to understand. And in essence, it's a social culture. So engineering is really all about two things. One is the technology. And water pumps work the same in Pakistan as they do in Perth in Australia. What's different is the culture. So it's the social culture in which engineering happens that limits the ability of engineers in so many situations to do what they really want to do, which is to see their ideas transformed into practice. So we have the technologies, we have the ideas. That's one of the big missing links. So they're my priorities. And it's such a great pleasure to be talking amongst people like Saima, Odeh, and Saida. So thank you very much for organizing this panel. It's been a great privilege to meet the other panelists as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to ask Odeh Al-Jayyousi about his perspective about the pressing need and about your discipline from the perspective of your discipline.
Well, thank you. I believe there are more than one dimension. One is basically changing the worldview, the mental model, the perspective. I think we need to rethink our mental model and our I call it a paradigm. We call it in philosophy and in epistemology the paradigm, how we see the world. And I look at physics as a civil engineer. And in physics, we have how we see reality in terms of 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions. So in classical physics, Newton was looking at reality from 3 dimensions, X, Y, Z. However, when relativity came with Einstein and other scholars, they looked at a 4th dimension, which is time. And I think now my question is for sustainability. In the last 3-4 decades, we were talking about 3 dimensions: economy, society, environment. But there is a missing 4th dimension. And this missing 4th dimension could be culture, spirituality, human rights, or governance. I mean, there are debate on what's the missing dimension. So I think in many cases, we think at conceptual thinking, we need to think of what is the missing dimension. Especially coming from the Middle East and looking at the ideas of refugees and the impact of conflict on environment and the idea of ecocide and ecocide. That's one dimension, which is basically about looking at the philosophy of science. Why do we do science? Why do we do engineering? Which is basically the public value, the public rationale. So besides, as a civil engineer, I was interested in products, but rather I was interested more in why rather than in what. Why are we doing this? So I think questioning the ethical dimension, the moral dimension, the ethical dimension, the social responsibility for engineers, for educators, for thinkers, for what we call reconstruction of the earth. In Arabic, we call it Imarat al-Ard. How our role as stewards, we are not only hunters, we are gardeners. We are not hunters, we are stewards and witnesses. So we have a role as stewards rather than hunters. So transforming our metaphor from a hunter to a gardener, or from a hunter to a steward and a witness. This is one dimension. The other dimension is the nexus. We call about the nexus of water, energy, food, nexus, security. So living in the Middle East, people, countries in the part of the Arab world, they are transforming from natural resources or oil-based economies to now to a knowledge economy and to more service economy, and going into what we call post-oil era, which is basically renewable energy and solar energy and technology. So the idea of nexus is how you can have integration between water security, food security, and environmental security. The final dimension is, again, the ethical dimension of technology, especially with the emergence of AI. How can we have a new social contract, a new norms and standards to deal with AI, and how can we basically ensure a new education paradigm for sustainable development? That's it for me.
Thank you, and I'm so with you on the need to think about about different dimensions and going beyond those three dimensions of sustainability. That's probably also why I am here, and who doesn't have anything apparently doesn't have anything to do with sustainability and the environment from a academic discipline point of view. But this is why we have to broaden our horizon on this, also academically speaking. Thank you. I would like to ask Dr. Faiza Abbasi next about her perspective.
Well, thank you. Nice to listen to everybody else. So I think one of the most pressing needs for sustainability today is that of the disturbed balance, natural balance and harmony, which I would like to present in the Quranic terms of Mizan. So with my students and as part of my own research, we have come up with 5 pillars of Islamic eco-theology. And as I said, today it's not just about how we bring products and resources in the market, be it food, be it minerals, be it timber, any minor forest produce or anything, how we bring it in the market and how we market it and for its productive use, for its consumptive use, or for any other value. The issue today is how people start to think about the non-infinite nature or the finite nature of these resources and how they need to understand their responsibility to strike a balance between the demand and the supply. So I have banked heavily upon the power of religion on people's values and people's behaviors and people's ethics and how they live life, how they live actually a life to make it a good life. And for that, we need to go, if needed, from multidisciplinary to interdisciplinary and even to the transdisciplinary. So that kind of structured academic discourse must migrate from this structured discourse to a unstructured research environment, and then the applied aspect of it. So my mission, as I would say, apart from my career, my mission happens to be taking this message to the people through the clergy and having it included in the theological instruction. So very simply, say, for example, in a khutbah of a Jummah prayer, if the Imam is saying, you should not steal, you should not beg, you should not, gamble or accept usury, why not include this also, that you should not waste water, or you should not kill endangered species, or you should not waste anything? Because maybe coming from a scientist like me or just an academician like us, people don't take it seriously. But when it comes from somebody like an imam who does a khutbah, then even uneducated people, because in the subcontinent, we are dealing with a very, very mind-boggling diversity of backgrounds when we talk to the population of the nation. There are people who are completely illiterate. There are tribals. There are people who are educated, semi-educated, highly educated, very, very intellectual. There are people who are getting Nobel Prizes and who are getting Booker Prizes. So there's a very, very broad range of background in terms of how we can communicate with them. So I will share with you a very small example. In Bangladesh, there are these And of course, the India side of Bengal, delta of the Sundarbans, where the mighty river Ganges comes and frays into the Bay of Bengal. There is an annual custom for the villagers to go into the forests on boats and collect honey. Now, before this caravan of boats goes into the forests and for collecting honey, there is a special prayer in every mosque. And the special prayer includes some instructions, like some do's and don'ts for the younger people who are going on this journey for the first time. And the Imam tells them that do not destroy every hive completely. Leave 10-20% of it there so that the bees can come back. And now come, let us raise our hands and pray to the Almighty that may the bee live so that the honey trade may continue to provide us a mode of subsistence. So I think the most pressing need is to include people into this kind of an national global ethic where just like a normal social crime seems like a crime, an environmental vandalism or an environmentally irresponsible behavior seems like a sin and a crime. And that's how we can have everybody on board. And that's how I think, because we have very little time, we all understand how climate change is determined to change everything. And how this might be an irreparable loss in just about 35-40 years. So we really don't have time in countries like India and Bangladesh and Pakistan. We really don't have the time to educate everyone, to build a scientific temper in everyone. There are constraints. There are very big social, political, economic constraints. So I think this really helps, and I do find it a very pressing need. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have seen a lot of different challenges, lots of different pressing needs at the same time, directed at one common goal, namely environment and sustainable development, basically. I would like to ask you for a briefish answer now. Considering the time, I would like you to identify and address and maybe briefly explain one aspect that should be on the research agenda for sustainability and the environment from your perspective. And that I'm going to start with Dr. Saima Ansari again.
Yeah, so great hearing everyone's perspectives again. Yeah, just in terms of one of the biggest things I think I've learned. So I think behavior change is important, but whilst being on this project, and obviously my line manager is Professor Shirley McGregor, so she's been really pushing this, you know, moving beyond behavior change, because actually there's a lot of systematic like changes that need to happen because of the urgency of sustainability, like of climate change. Everything is happening so fast. I don't think it's enough to just tell people this is how you should live, because often there's like insufficient understandings of social, political, cultural context, and there's so much diversity within places and people. And I think the focus should shift from rather than just individual responsibilities, so actually the structural kind of responsibilities, so the governments and people in charge, because there needs to be a deeper change. So for example, if you are going to talk about sustainability, this topic most likely will never come up for someone who's not from, you know, a wealthy background, someone who has other worries, like, you know, putting bread on the table as an urgent issue. They're going to see whatever is doable for them. So actually, sometimes sustainability, we talk about it, but it's actually a privilege to be able to talk about it, to be able to discuss, and you know, I'm sure for a lot of the people maybe on this panel and the people that have joined, this is an issue that they have the luxury of, you know, being able to talk about. But people who are living their day-to-day work, like, you know, working really, really hard just to keep, you know, like feed their families, sustainability is really, really far from the agenda. So actually what needs to happen is actually a deeper system change to make sustainability easy and accessible for people, so people can also start gaining a sense of trust and support, as well as, you know, making the strides that they need to gain momentum and, you know, having a more, you know, like a just, sustainable future.
Thank you. So sustainability as an issue that is also accessible to less privileged people and making them aware and giving them the resources to be to this for this awareness, right?
Yeah, and just moving beyond just, you know, like people need to do more. Actually, like we like our governments, the people in charge, there's so many structural barriers for this to happen. It needs to move beyond just placing the blame on people and saying, oh, they need to know more. People already know so much. People can contribute so much, especially just listening to Professor James just talk about, well, actually, you know, the Aboriginal society, they've got so many things and living sustainable. So, well, why don't we learn from those kind of behaviors? So, you know, have bigger systems in charge that can, you know, pass that down, make it easy for people to be more sustainable.
Right. I think that might be key. Exactly. Thank you. And now it's Professor James Trevelyan's.
Well, it might be a bit surprising to come from an engineer, but I think the most pressing research priority is to understand language, and particularly how language has shaped cultures and civilizations in this area of sustainability. And here again, I thank you very much, Saima, for reminding us of what I said about Aboriginal people. I think with Aboriginal people, there's over 500 different languages there, and many of them are in danger of dying out. So I think that that's one area of pressing research, is to understand those languages and to understand these ideas, and also to understand the influence of new ideas and how they can be propagated. Think, for example, about crowdfunding. You know, that's a concept which has emerged in the last 10, 20 years, and it has transformed the way that many new ideas see the light of day. And I think that these are important lessons, because we, as Saida said, we don't have much time. And I think that we need to think of creative ways to tackle the human behavior and even the spiritual side. I think, Saida, I love your ideas and in terms of motivating people who have limited education. And you know, religion is a very powerful tool, and I think that we need to work a lot more there. You know, even in this country, the USA, where you know, it's probably being seen as a bit of an outcast in the sustainability sphere at the moment, but I think it's important to understand there's very powerful local movements here, and many of them based in the Christian religion, of course, and understanding how to link these ideas together with some new language, some new ideas that can accelerate this behavioral change, which we all see as being crucial. And also, like Odeh, your idea of introducing this idea of governance. You know, if we look at water, for example, and particularly in the subcontinent, we have water tables that are getting deeper and deeper as we talk, because the technology of solar-driven water pumps, high-efficiency water pumps, has enabled water to be pumped from greater and greater depths. But all that's happened, of course, is that the water tables are going down faster than ever. So this idea of governance is crucial. And so getting new language, new ideas, new words out there to change the way people think and act, I think is very important.
Thank you. So I'm all, you know, I'm with you on this language, and that's my expertise. And we know that language does, we call it actually language culture in my discipline, that language does shape culture and the other way around. Like you might have thought, you might think of the umpteen ways that the Inuit have, the umpteen words that Inuit have for snow, and that is shaped by their culture and by their environment, by their context. And that is that's just an example of how language shapes culture and how language shapes the way that the environment is perceived. So thank you for this, and I would like to ask Professor Odeh what kind of aspects he identifies.
I think the two ideas is basically to have an eclectic approach. One is small is beautiful, which is basically local solutions, simple solutions, thinking small is beautiful. And the other one is about the policy, mission-oriented innovation policy. Now, when we look at the iPhone that Professor James talks about, it was driven by a policy, a mission, that we want to land man on the moon. And there was a collective funding from all sectors to work on one mission, which is basically to land man on the moon in the 60s during the Kennedy time. The outcome of landing man on the moon, it came of all this transistor and renewable energy and nanotechnology, etc. So I think we need to define sustainability as part of a national mission. This could be sustainable innovation. It could be part of learning from nature, biomimicry. It could be part of education, trying to having new models of learning and education with the emerging technologies. So I think the key message is balancing small solutions with big solutions, small solution at local level, community-based, people-centered development, at a higher level, the discourse, the policy discourse, to redefine sustainability as a national mission, that all sectors work on one mission rather than spreading the efforts across sectors. Thank you.
Thank you. So on the one hand, we have to balance small solutions, local solutions at local level, but embed them in the context of a greater mission. That is, I would even say that's not only national, but also global, if we are to succeed. Thank you so much. And again, last but not least, Dr. Faiza Abbasi.
Well, thank you. What I would like to add to what the other three distinguished panelists have already said is that I think the most pressing need today for research is to break the silos in which research has existed till now. New knowledge has to exist at the intersection of two or more disciplines. And if we have to come to a solution to a real life ground level problem, then it has to be approached by more than two disciplines. Now, multidisciplinarity and holistic education and interdisciplinarity is something that we all give very good lip service to. But when it actually comes to some ground level research in the interdisciplinary way, then everybody has qualms, okay, what does he know about this and what does he know? How can he come up with, like that? So we are producing and reproducing and replicating a lot of research that we've already done, and then it becomes just, research for the sake of research and not actually solving much of the problems that humanity really needs to solve. So that, I would say, is the biggest challenge. And once that happens, once we are able to reform by bringing in these transformative changes, that silos of disciplines are broken and disciplinary boundaries are collapsed, then I think we might, because sustainability, I think it applies to every discipline, almost every discipline. And I'm so happy that Professor James says that it's about language. A lot can be achieved by focusing on language and by putting people together. I mean, I try my best, as you said in my introduction, Karin, that I'm heading this teacher training center, which is my position in the university. This is about in-service teacher training programs that are mandatory for the promotions of the teachers. So when they're there to learn about teaching techniques and teaching effectively in higher education, I make it a point that they are sensitized towards sustainability. So we try to make them aware that it is everybody's cup of tea, that whether you were teaching whatever subject, whatever language you're researching in whichever discipline, you can bring in some issues of sustainable development. But how, and they seem to agree also. I meet more than 2,000 teachers every year in my training programs, and I think I get a positive response from everyone as to they can marry sustainability and environmental concerns with their respective disciplines. But that kind of a structure in higher education institutions so far does not exist, under which this kind of intersection can be found, can be explored, and can give rise to some new knowledge that can help us achieve one of the sustainable development goals.
Thank you so much. I would like to share something from my university, which is supposed to be a lighthouse university or has pledged to be a lighthouse university for sustainable education for sustainable development. And as I said before, we are making a point of doing just that, what you just suggested, to break down these disciplinary barriers and to put the stewardship, as some of you said, for education for sustainable development on the shoulders of various disciplines. And we have several initiatives for this. I won't go into detail because I would like to give you more time to speak. But this is what we are trying to educate our teachers, because I also I'm also a teacher educator in our University of Education. We are trying to give various perspectives of the various disciplines and try to get them together in our holistic effort for education for sustainable development. But it is a process. We have been working on this for maybe 6 years or 7 years, and we're still, it's still work in progress. But it's fascinating work, I have to say, and I am learning a lot. And then I'm also learning a lot about my discipline, because I asked myself, okay, what can my discipline, which is heavy on language and but also culture, what can my discipline bring into the team, contribute to education for sustainable development? And I have now learned from this panel that this is where my expertise is, which is language and culture, that this can be a valuable contribution in a kind of multidisciplinary approach to the problems and the challenges that we are facing. So thank you very much for this, everybody. And I would like to invite questions or comments from the chat. I have a previous comment for Dr. Ansari, and Dome Chudiak says, thank you so much for making this point, Dr. Ansari. Being green and sustainable can be very expensive and effort intense due to various infrastructural and economical barriers, cost of living crisis in a lot of contexts. That's my addition. And it can be a turner for those who struggle to be educated about being sustainable. Would you like to comment on this one?
Yeah, I definitely think, especially in Europe and UK, I guess because we're having the cost of living that's going up. So much of my project was actually, introducing this topic. It was almost as if it was so distant to some of the participants because they had so many other worries that were forefront. So to be asked a question on sustainability, they were like, well, what do I have to offer? What could I possibly do? I try and, like, I don't know, like have less food waste or water. But apart from that, there's how much more can I add? Because, for example, buying like more sustainable clothing is often very, very expensive. So, the normal high street shops, places like Primark are very easy, approachable. It's fast fashion. And, we know that fast fashion is really detrimental to sustainability. But unfortunately, for these people, anything higher than certain price tags is not something that they can easily access. So, we need to have this talk about having more sustainable clothing or access to small things like that, because it is a luxury to be sustainable. That's what we found through our study. And yeah, and just going quickly back to the question around language as well, for a lot of the participants who were Somali and Pakistani, they didn't even understand the concept of sustainability, the language. So we had to re-explain and talk about in terms of dunya, which is like this Arabic concept and Islamic concept of, stewardship for the earth through the religious terms. So actually, yeah, language is important. So when they're getting handed these leaflets about being sustainable, well, actually, that term means nothing. Net zero means nothing, right? Like a lot of people have all these terms hovering around, and in the UK we have this target for net zero, and the normal public, it just kind of goes over their head. They're like, what does that mean? So yeah, I definitely think being inclusive of all of those things, and definitely looking at affordability and the structural barriers, that's something we need to break down before we start talking about behavior change.
Yes, and this is why we are again at intersectionality, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I have another question, and that's for the entire panel. So it's up for grabs, whoever is going to respond to it. Could the panel reflect on how Muslim immigrants in the global north be agents or stewards of sustainability practices? So could the panel reflect on how Muslim immigrants in the global north be agents and stewards of sustainability practices? So that's James Trevelyan, who's up first.
Well, this might be a challenge, but I think I would cite my wife here because she migrated from Pakistan to Australia, which is part of the global north, even though it's in the south. And she married me. And as a result, I, as an engineer, was confronted in Pakistan with problems there. And I was fortunate enough to, through a serendipity, to come up with some interesting solutions. So, particularly, and our previous question addressed this important question of cost. And so here, part of the issue is education. So let's have a look. One of the basic costs, particularly in Britain, in the north of Britain, is cost of heating. And there are very simple devices called electric throw blankets, which provide warmth on literally about 50 watts, which is, you can almost run it on a battery. These are incredibly energy efficient devices, and they enable people to be comfortable in an ambient temperature much lower than would otherwise be the case. If you want to heat a whole building, you want to heat it to about 20 degrees centigrade, about 670 Fahrenheit. But if you use localized warming, then you can have the heating temperature much lower, and there's an important byproduct there. The important byproduct is that then our natural ability to acclimatize to cold or heat, for that matter, is not impeded by the heating of the whole environment or the cooling of the whole environment. And therefore, you need less heating. So there's a pathway to lowering costs, and it requires education. We have all the technologies that we need. It's just a question of finding ways to educate people to use these technologies. And here I would also point to the great example of the Rocky Mountains Institute here in America, which was founded by Professor Amory Lovins, who basically said, we need to be thinking of ways to do what we do now, but with 1/5 of the resources and 1/5 of the energy. And I'm very happy that with Coolsey, we managed to achieve that, but it was an accident. But it happened in the first place because Samina, my dear wife, migrated to the global north in Australia, and we got married and got together. So there is one way in which and it might be a challenge to people who are migrants to say, well, you've got to get married and maybe hope that this happens, but there's just one example.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, could I just jump in on that question?
Oh, yes, please do.
Yeah, so we have, the study. So Samina, thank you for your question. We have a study, obviously the TIES project is actually looking at the what they could, migrants from the global south could add to when they move to the global north. So the TIES project looks at that. And some of the things, as an example, was learning knowledge. So a lot of the people in the UK, especially based in Manchester, that have moved from Somalia or Pakistan, they tend to know a lot about growing, like agriculture. So there's already things here that they've set up groups and hubs. There's one in Oldham community centre that they basically teach other people how to grow food. Growing is a very big, it's a very big technical thing. Like if you don't know how to grow, like me, you'll find it very difficult. So, just learning from people's experience and coming from agricultural backgrounds, they move here and they, share that knowledge with other people. And maybe, you know, certain food practices, like, you know, using lentils, like a lot of Pakistani households use lentils, which are more sustainable, and, you know, you can keep them for longer, and they feed more people, food sharing, etc. You know, all of these things. And people have shared incidences where they've, you know, shown that they kind of spread that out, and they communicate that within the community and share with neighbors, and people here who from the global north learn through those experiences.
If I may, Dr. Karin.
Oh, yes. Go ahead,
Yes,
please.
I think in terms of the global north and collaboration with global south, in innovation, there is a notion of co-creation. So you can create new ideas or transforming ideas into some products or processes through co-creation, through creating what we call innovator without borders. So I think there are some tools that you can have a global challenge. Now we are facing with the global challenges as we speak, that there are refugees, there are people under attack in Palestine and Gaza. So having a global challenge from Australia to Pakistan to UK or Europe, to look at mobile homes for city reconstruction. I think after destruction, like what happened in the World War II in Germany and in Japan, there is always opportunities for reconstruction if people develop new ideas by collaboration between global north and global south, by instituting what I call global innovation labs to expand empathy rather than expand territory. So I think with the technology era now, there is a lot of idea of land domination and the human suffering. We need to transform the narrative to reconstruction and having more human empathy, and trying to have the global north supporting with innovative ideas for the voiceless, the poor, and the marginalized, and the refugees under fire.
Thank you. I have a last question, which is huge, but I'd still like to address it. For anyone who wants to answer, so this is also up for grabs for the whole panel. What are your thoughts on the future of agriculture, and what approach would improve the technology in this industry to make it more sustainable?
Can I come in there,
Oh,
Karin?
yes, please.
So just a quick one there. I think that you know, low cost refrigeration and finding also that's not only just the engineering side, it's also the financing models that are available. So, you know, refrigeration is probably holds one of the greatest prospects of being able to preserve more food so that the food that we do grow is not lost between the farm and the customer. You know, that this is technology which has been refined incredibly in particularly in the US and exported to many other countries. We just need to find better ways to do this on a scale and with financing instruments that can work in countries like India, Pakistan, and so on and so forth. Yes, there are possibilities there, and definitely this is a major focus of attention at the moment for the World Bank and the International Finance Corporation. So there's one answer to that question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I would like to wrap up this panel in terms of giving us kind of a summary that we have talked about. So we have been talking about, we have just scratched the surface. This was to be expected, of course. We could talk about this until the cows come home, and still we would not have exhausted every topic that is under the umbrella topic of sustainability and the environment. We have the global south, which should be an interaction, or is an interaction with the global north. You were talking about innovation as co-creations, but the global south is in the limelight here. The urgency of climate change, with all its challenges, was highlighted. Stewardship is a requirement, with a combination of sustainability that we talked about, culture, religion, language that also has a spiritual aspect. And in this sense, indigenous people would have to be considered as role models. the eco-genocide we're facing here. We talked about that, but on the one hand, and all the challenges that come with climate change that we went into, but both on a theoretical and a practical application level, there's hope. There's hope. We've got we were calling for new and adapted paradigms of real multidisciplinary cooperation of how to look at sustainable development, taking a more interdisciplinary view on the theoretical level. On a practical level, we are seeing projects, innovations, for example, in terms of water security, for example, in terms of refrigeration and cooling and so on, products that will address the challenges of climate change and address climate change management, but the urgency is real. We need to be quick about it. So here I would like to finish and hand over to Katarzyna, and thank you all.
Thank you so much, Professor Vogt, for fantastic hosting today. Thank you to our panelists and to our truly global audience today. I've seen all the comments, very informative, interesting explanation. Thank you for the detailed explanation. In fact, impactful, inspirational panel. Thank you so much. For those people in the audience who are really, whose heart is in the environment and sustainability, we will have a few more events. There will be another environmental panel on Saturday, next weekend. And also we will have creative recycling event on Saturday, 19th of April. And now the next event coming up also on Zoom is Students Celebrating Arts next week on Thursday at 6 o'clock in the evening. And we've got one more coming up, really interesting event. It will be celebrating calligraphy and creativity with Lord Richard MacLeod. He's an amazing artist. Honestly, you've got to see his works. Now, if we do have any artists in the audience, any photographers, any calligraphers who live in the UK, and we've got Muslim Arts Awards coming up the second year. You can apply online on the MACFEST website. Just like last year, you can see the photos from the ceremony, from the exhibition. I really encourage everybody who's got this creative stream inside. If you want to show your works and apply, please do. You don't have to be an established artist. So that's all from me. And I hope to see you on Thursday, 10th of April at 6 in the evening UK time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was absolutely brilliant. Loved it in every way. And I'm sure the audience was from Indonesia all the way to other countries. You can imagine. It's been amazing. Inshallah, we'll have another panel just like this next year. And hopefully Karin can host it again. So if you know any countries, dear friends, that you recommend for us to approach from 5 continents, we'd love to hear from them. So I'm busy researching for the next round for next year, 2026. You have been absolutely brilliant. And I've learned so much from you. I'm the lay person. So, you know, it's really been inspiring. And I'm so glad I thought of this idea for universities panel. Thank you. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And Eid Mubarak to those of you who just hosted it recently. Goodbye for now.
Okay, bye. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a good day.
Yeah.